The blood on her hands never seemed to fade. Hope O'Malley scrubbed until her skin was raw, the basin water turning pink in the dim light of her rented room at Willow Creek's only boarding house. 3 states and 6 towns behind her, yet the memories chased her like shadows at dusk. The year was 1876, and the promise of a new life in the Montana Territory had drawn her west after the nightmare in Chicago. Hope dried her hands on a threadbare towel, wincing at the sting of her cracked knuckles. 24 years old and already carrying enough secrets to fill a cemetery. She stared at her reflection in the spotted mirror, auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, green eyes hollow with exhaustion, skin pale despite months under the western sun. No one here knew who she was. No one knew what she'd done. A distant piano drifted up from the saloon across the dusty street. Another sleepless night awaited her. Hope tucked a well-worn letter into her pocket, the only possession that mattered anymore, and stepped to the window. Willow Creek was just another dot on the map, another place to hide, but something told her she wouldn't be staying long. They always found her eventually. Morning brought the familiar sounds of a frontier town coming alive. Hope dressed quickly in her plain brown dress, one of only 3 she owned. The boarding house matron, Mrs. Wheeler, nodded curtly as Hope descended the stairs. "Morning, Miss O'Malley. Sleep well?" The older woman's eyes were sharp with curiosity. "Well enough, thank you." Hope forced a smile. "Is there any work to be found today?" Mrs. Wheeler pursed her lips. "Mercantile might need help. Owner's wife is expecting. Or try the telegraph office, they're short-handed since young Henry took off for the gold fields." Hope nodded and slipped out the door before more questions could follow. 6 days in Willow Creek, and already the whispers had started. The mysterious woman with no past and no connections. She needed money, but more importantly, she needed to blend in. The telegraph office was a small building wedged between the blacksmith and the land office. A bell jingled as she entered, and a thin man with spectacles looked up from his desk. "Help you, miss?" "I heard you might need assistance. I can read and write, and I learn quickly." The man studied her face. "Can you operate a telegraph key?" "No, but Sorry, miss. Need someone who knows the work already." He returned to his papers, dismissing her. The mercantile yielded similar results. By midday, Hope's feet ached from walking the length of the town's single main street. She paused outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, hesitating. Working in a saloon was dangerous, too many eyes, too many questions, but hunger made pragmatists of everyone eventually. As she stood contemplating, a commotion erupted from down the street. A group of riders approached, trail dust coating their clothes. At their center rode a man whose presence commanded attention. Tall and broad-shouldered with a straight back, unlike the hunched posture of men who'd spent too many years in the mines or bent over plows. "Preston's back!" someone called out, and a small crowd gathered to greet the newcomers. Hope stepped back into the shadow of the awning, watching as the riders dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. The man called Preston removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat touched by sun. His face was weathered but youthful, perhaps 30 years of age. Something about his confident stance made Hope uneasy. Men with authority always meant trouble. "Got him, Sheriff," Preston announced, gesturing to 2 men with bound hands. "Found them at the old Blackwater mine, just like you said." The sheriff, a gray-haired man with a substantial belly, clapped Preston on the shoulder. "Good work, Winters. Knew you'd bring 'em in." Preston Winters. A bounty hunter or lawman of some kind. Hope turned away. Definitely someone to avoid. She was halfway to the boarding house when a voice called out, "Miss, excuse me, miss." Hope froze, then slowly turned. Preston Winters was jogging toward her, hat in hand. Her heart pounded against her ribs. "Sorry to bother you," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "You dropped this." In his outstretched hand was her letter, the worn paper that had been tucked safely in her pocket. Or so she'd thought. "Thank you," she whispered, taking it quickly and securing it in her pocket. His blue eyes studied her face with unsettling intensity. New to town? Relatively. Hope took a step back. If you'll excuse me, wait. His voice was gentle but insistent. Are you looking for work? I couldn't help overhearing at the telegraph office earlier. Hope stiffened. You were watching me. A slight flush colored his tanned cheeks. Not intentionally. Small town, hard not to notice things. He cleared his throat. My sister runs the school on the edge of town. She's been looking for someone to help with the younger children. I'm not a teacher. Can you read, write, do sums? When she nodded, he continued. That's more education than most folks around here. She'd be grateful for the help. Hope hesitated. A school might be safe. Children ask direct questions, but rarely the dangerous kind. Where is this school? Preston pointed toward the east end of town. White building with a bell tower. Can't miss it. Tell Penny that I sent you. He replaced his hat and tipped the brim. Preston Winters. Hope O'Malley. Hope, he repeated, as if testing the name. It suits you. Before she could decipher his meaning, he was striding back toward the sheriff's office, spurs jingling with each step. The schoolhouse was exactly as he'd described, a white clapboard building with a small bell tower. Inside, Hope found a young woman with the same wheat-colored hair as Preston, struggling to maintain order among 20 children of various ages. Mrs. Stevens, I've told you 3 times to stop pulling on Sarah's braids. James Cooper, get down from that windowsill this instant. Hope cleared her throat from the doorway. The woman turned, relief washing over her face at the sight of an adult. Oh, thank heavens. Are you a parent? No, your brother sent me. He said you might need help. The woman's blue eyes, so similar to Preston's, lit up. Did he now? Well, bless him. I'm Penny Winters, and you are? Hope O'Malley. Miss O'Malley. Can you read? Yes. Can you stop Jimmy Cooper from eating chalk? Hope glanced at a small boy with a dusty white substance around his mouth. I can try. Penny laughed. You're hired. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of spelling lessons and arithmetic. Hope found unexpected peace in the schoolhouse, despite the constant chaos of energetic children. Penny was kind but not overly curious, and the work kept Hope's mind occupied during the day, leaving less time for the nightmares that still plagued her sleep. She saw Preston occasionally in town, always from a distance. Sometimes their eyes would meet, and he would tip his hat in greeting, but he never approached her again. Hope told herself this was a relief, though something fluttered in her chest whenever he rode past the schoolhouse. One Friday afternoon, as Hope was sweeping the schoolroom after the children had left, Penny approached with a small envelope. Monthly wages, she explained. Not much, but honest work. Hope stared at the envelope. It had been so long since she'd earned money that wasn't wrapped in shame or desperation. Thank you. Penny leaned against a desk. Some of us are gathering at my place tomorrow evening. Nothing fancy, just supper and maybe some music. You should come. Hope's first instinct was to refuse. Social gatherings meant questions. Your brother will be there? The question slipped out before she could stop it. A knowing smile touched Penny's lips. Preston. Yes, when he's not out tracking fugitives. He asks about you, you know. Heat crept up Hope's neck. I'm sure he's just being polite. My brother is many things, but he's never just polite. He either cares or he doesn't. Penny straightened and headed for the door. 7 o'clock. The house with the blue door, just past the church. Hope stood with the broom in her hand long after Penny had gone, caught between longing and fear. A normal evening with normal people, the kind of life she'd abandoned 3 years ago, the kind she didn't deserve. She didn't plan to go. Decided firmly against it while she ate her solitary supper at the boarding house, resolved to stay in her room with the book she'd borrowed from the school. But at 6:30, Hope found herself washing her face, pinning her hair in a softer style, and changing into her best dress, a dark blue cotton that brought out the green in her eyes. The Winters' home was modest but welcoming. Light spilled from the windows, and the sound of laughter drifted through the evening air. Hope hesitated at the gate, pulse racing. She could still turn back. You came. She started at the deep voice behind her. Preston stood a few feet away, a bundle of firewood in his arms. His hair was damp, as if he'd just washed, and he'd exchanged his usual trail clothes for a clean shirt and vest. I was just, Hope gestured vaguely, standing at the gate looking terrified. His smile softened the words. It's just supper, Miss O'Malley, not a firing squad. Is that supposed to be reassuring, Mr. Winters? He laughed, a rich sound that curled around her like smoke. Come on. Penny will be thrilled you're here, and Mrs. Finch makes the best apple pie this side of the Mississippi. Inside, Hope was introduced to a handful of townsfolk, the doctor and his wife, the blacksmith and his young daughter, the elderly couple who ran the mercantile. To her relief, they seemed more interested in eating and sharing local gossip than interrogating her about her past. Preston kept a respectful distance throughout the meal, but Hope felt his gaze on her whenever she spoke. After supper, someone produced a fiddle, and the furniture was pushed aside for dancing. May I? Preston appeared at her elbow, hand extended. Hope shook her head. I don't dance. Everyone dances. He took her hand gently. Just follow my lead. Before she could protest further, she was swept into a simple two-step. Preston's hand was warm at her waist, his other holding hers with surprising delicacy for a man of his size. Penny says you're good with the children, he said as they moved around the small parlor. They're easier than adults, less complicated. Less judgmental, you mean? Hope missed a step, but Preston steadied her. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. His eyes held hers. Everyone in Willow Creek has a past, Miss O'Malley. Some just carry theirs closer to the surface. The music shifted to a slower tune, and Preston adjusted his hold. Hope should have excused herself, but something in his steadiness kept her feet moving. Is that why you became a bounty hunter? To judge others for their pasts? Deputy U.S. Marshal, he corrected. And no, I believe in justice, not judgment. There's a difference. Is there? Hope couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Preston studied her face. Whatever you're running from, it doesn't define you. Hope stiffened and pulled away. You don't know anything about me. I'd like to. His expression was earnest. If you'd let me. The room suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. I should go. Thank you for the evening. She turned and moved quickly toward the door, ignoring Penny's concerned look. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. Hope hurried down the path, fighting tears that threatened to spill. Miss O'Malley, Preston caught up to her at the gate. I've overstepped. I apologize. Hope kept her back to him. It's not your fault. I don't belong here. Here at the gathering or here in Willow Creek? Either. Both. She wrapped her arms around herself. I should never have come. To my sister's home or to Montana territory. Despite herself, a small laugh escaped her. Do you always ask such direct questions, Marshal Winters? Only when I'm trying to understand someone who interests me. He moved to stand beside her, both of them facing the moonlit street. I won't pry, Miss O'Malley, but if you ever want to talk, I'm a good listener. Hope glanced at him. In the silver light, his expression was open, without a trace of the suspicion or desire she was accustomed to seeing in men's eyes. Thank you for the dance, she said finally. And please apologize to your sister for my abrupt departure. May I walk you home? These streets are safe enough, but that's not necessary. Preston nodded, accepting her refusal without argument. Good night, then. I hope you'll come again next week. Hope didn't answer. She couldn't promise what tomorrow would bring, let alone next week. Every day in one place was a risk. The following Wednesday, a spring storm hit Willow Creek with unexpected ferocity. Rain lashed against the schoolhouse windows as Hope helped the children into their coats and hats. Stay in pairs, Penny instructed. Older ones look after the little ones. Go straight home, no detours. As the last of the children splashed away, Penny turned to Hope with concern. This is turning into quite the deluge. How far to your boarding house? Other end of town. I'll be fine. Nonsense, you'll catch your death. Penny peered out the window. Look, there's Preston. Perfect timing. Hope's stomach dropped as she saw the marshal's tall figure approaching on horseback, rain dripping from his hat brim. Penny threw open the door. Preston, thank goodness, can you take Miss O'Malley to her boarding house? This rain is dreadful. Before Hope could protest, Preston was dismounting and tying his horse under the schoolhouse eave. Of course. He stamped his boots on the threshold. Ready when you are, Miss O'Malley. Hope looked between the siblings' expectant faces and sighed. Very well. Wonderful. I need to stay and prepare for tomorrow's lessons. You two go on. Penny's innocent expression didn't fool Hope for a second. Outside, Preston held his coat over Hope's head as they hurried to his horse. Up you go, he said, boosting her into the saddle before swinging up behind her. The proximity was alarming, his chest solid against her back, his arms encircling her to hold the reins. Hope sat rigid as the horse picked its way through the muddy street. Relax, Preston said near her ear. I promise I don't bite. It's not that. Then what? Hope stared straight ahead. I'm not accustomed to this. Being helped? Being close to someone. Preston was quiet for a moment. That sounds lonely. No one had ever described her isolation quite that way before. Not as a punishment or a failing, but simply as a state of loneliness. The simplicity of it made her throat tighten. It's safer, she finally said. Safer than what? The rain filled the silence between them. Hope could feel the steady beat of his heart against her back. Safer than trusting the wrong person, she answered at last. They had reached the boarding house. Preston dismounted first, then reached up to help Hope down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for the ride, Marshal. Preston, he corrected. At least when I'm not wearing the badge. Hope nodded. Preston, she turned to go, but his voice stopped her. Miss O'Malley Hope, whatever happened before you came here, I hope someday you'll trust me enough to tell me. Hope looked back at him, this man who seemed determined to see past her carefully constructed walls. Why do you care? Rain streamed down his face as he considered her question. Because you look at the world like someone who's seen the worst of it, yet you're still gentle with those children. Because you try so hard to be invisible, but when you forget to hide, you shine brighter than anyone I've ever met. Hope's carefully maintained composure threatened to crack. You're seeing what you want to see. No, his voice was firm. I'm seeing you. The real you, not the person you're pretending to be. A flash of panic shot through her. You don't know what I've done. I know who you are now. That's what matters to me. Hope shook her head. You're wrong. The past always matters. It always finds you. She turned and fled into the boarding house, heart pounding. Preston Winters was dangerous not because he meant her harm, but because he made her want things she couldn't have. A normal life, forgiveness, a future. That night, Hope barely slept. She kept replaying Preston's words in her mind, the way he looked at her like he could see straight through to her soul. If he knew the truth, if anyone knew, she would have to run again. And for the first time, the thought of leaving Willow Creek filled her with something more than resignation. It felt like loss. At dawn, Hope made a decision. She would finish the school term, save every penny of her wages, and then move on. 2 more months, and she would be gone before anyone got too close, before Preston Winters broke down the walls she'd built to protect herself and others from her past. For the next few weeks, Hope was careful to maintain distance between herself and Preston. She declined further invitations to Penny's gatherings and found excuses to be busy whenever he visited the schoolhouse. If he noticed her withdrawal, he respected it, never pushing or demanding her attention. But Willow Creek was a small town, and their paths inevitably crossed. One Saturday morning in May, Hope was at the mercantile purchasing supplies for the school when Preston entered. He nodded politely and moved to the counter to speak with Mr. Edwards about an order. Hope tried to focus on selecting chalk and paper, but her awareness of his presence made her clumsy. She dropped a slate, wincing as it cracked against the floor. "Allow me," Preston said, already bending to retrieve the pieces. "I can manage," Hope insisted, kneeling as well. Their hands met over the broken slate, and Hope drew back as if burned. Preston remained still, studying her face. "Have I offended you in some way, Miss O'Malley?" "No, of course not." "Then why are you avoiding me?" Hope glanced at Mr. Edwards, who was making a poor show of not listening. "This isn't the place for such a discussion," Preston nodded. "Will you walk with me then, just to the church and back?" It was a reasonable request, made in a public place with no expectation of privacy. Hope couldn't refuse without seeming rude. Very well. Outside, the May sunshine warmed the boardwalk. They walked in silence until they reached the white church at the end of the street. "I won't apologize for what I said that night," Preston began, "but I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." Hope kept her eyes on the distant mountains. "You didn't. That's the problem." "I don't understand." She turned to face him. "I'm leaving Willow Creek at the end of the school term. It's better if we don't, complicate things." Disappointment flickered across his face. "I see. May I ask where you're headed?" "West. California, perhaps." "Running again?" Hope stiffened. "Moving on. There's a difference." "Is there?" He echoed her earlier challenge with a sad smile. "Seems to me you're running from something that terrifies you. You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell me." His voice was gentle but insistent. "Whatever it is, Hope, it can't be as bad as you think." A bitter laugh escaped her. "You hunt men for a living, Marshal. You of all people should know that some actions are unforgivable. I hunt men who've made choices to harm others for their own gain. Is that what you did?" "No," she whispered, "but someone was harmed because of me." It was the most she'd ever revealed about her past, and the admission hung in the air between them. Preston didn't press further, seeming to understand the cost of even that small truth. "We all carry regrets," he said finally, "things we wish we could undo, but running from them only gives them power." Hope shook her head. "It's not that simple." "It never is." Preston looked toward the schoolhouse visible in the distance. "But you found something good here. The children adore you." "Penny says you're a natural teacher." "I've enjoyed it," Hope admitted, "more than I expected to." "Then stay." He turned back to her, blue eyes earnest. "Not for me. For yourself. For the life you could build here." The longing that rose in her chest was almost painful. "I can't." "You won't," he corrected. "There's a difference." Using her own words against her again, Hope couldn't help the small smile that curved her lips. "You're very persistent, Marshal Winters." "Preston," he reminded her. "And yes, it's a trait that serves me well in my profession. Less so in personal matters, apparently." They began walking back toward the mercantile, the tension between them somewhat eased. "If you truly want to leave, I won't try to stop you," Preston said as they neared the store. "But I hope you'll consider that perhaps the past that haunts you has led you exactly where you need to be." Hope looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Maybe it's not a curse driving you from place to place. Maybe it's been a map all along, bringing you here." "To Willow Creek?" His eyes met hers. "To me." The directness of his statement left her speechless. Before she could formulate a response, a shout from down the street drew Preston's attention. "Marshal! Telegram from Helena!" Preston tipped his hat to Hope. "Duty calls. Think about what I said?" He strode away, leaving Hope with a tumult of emotions she had no name for. Hope returned to the mercantile, paid for her supplies, and walked slowly back to the boarding house, Preston's words echoing in her mind. A map, not a curse. The idea was both beautiful and terrifying. That evening, as Hope sat on her bed mending a tear in her skirt, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Mrs. Wheeler, the boarding house matron, holding a small package. "This came for you, dear. Boy from the telegraph office brought it over." Hope thanked her and closed the door, staring at the brown paper package with mounting dread. No one knew she was in Willow Creek. No one should be sending her anything. With trembling fingers, she unwrapped the package. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Chicago Tribune, dated 2 weeks earlier. The headline read, "Vincent Blackwood released from prison, vows to find witness who testified against him." Hope sank to the floor, the clipping fluttering from her numb fingers. 3 years wasn't enough. It would never be enough for what he'd done to Eleanor. And now he was free and hunting for Hope. The clipping bore no note, no indication of who had sent it, a warning from a friend or a threat from an enemy. It didn't matter. The message was clear. Her time in Willow Creek was over. Hope moved automatically, pulling her carpet bag from under the bed and beginning to pack her meager possessions. She would leave tonight, under cover of darkness. There was a stagecoach heading west at dawn from the next town over. If she walked through the night, she could make it. The letter that Preston had returned to her weeks ago, the last letter Eleanor had written before Vincent Blackwood had killed her, lay on the bedside table. Hope tucked it carefully into her pocket, next to her heart, a reminder of why she could never stop running. By midnight, Hope had slipped out of the boarding house, leaving a month's rent on Mrs. Wheeler's desk, along with a brief note explaining a family emergency had called her away. The lie tasted bitter, but it was kinder than the truth. The night was clear, a half moon lighting the road west. Hope walked briskly, her carpetbag bumping against her leg with each step. She had done this before, left in the night with no goodbyes. But never had it felt so much like tearing out a piece of her heart. She was a mile outside of town when the sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Hope stepped off the road, hiding behind a large boulder. The rider approached slowly, as if searching for something or someone. "Hope?" Preston's voice carried in the night air. "Hope, I know you're out here." She remained silent, hardly daring to breathe. "The telegraph operator mentioned a message came for you." The hoofbeats stopped nearby. "Mrs. Wheeler said you left in a hurry. Whatever's frightened you, let me help." Hope closed her eyes, fighting the urge to step out from hiding. How easy it would be to trust this man, to let him shoulder some of her burden. But she knew better. Involving others only put them in danger. "I'm a U.S. Marshal, Hope. Whatever trouble you're in, I can protect you." The conviction in his voice nearly broke her resolve. But the memory of Eleanor's broken body, the blood that had soaked into Hope's dress as she held her dying friend, was stronger than any promise of protection. Preston's horse moved closer to her hiding place. "If you can hear me, know this. I'll be waiting in Willow Creek. When you're ready to stop running, I'll be there." The hoofbeats resumed, growing fainter as Preston rode back toward town. Hope waited until the sound had completely faded before emerging from her hiding place, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty night. Dawn found Hope in the small town of Cedar Springs, bleary-eyed and exhausted. The westbound stage wasn't due for another hour, so she took a seat on a bench outside the station, her carpetbag clutched tightly to her chest. "Ticket to where, miss?" the station agent asked when he opened for business. Hope hesitated. "How far west does this stage go?" "Terminus is Virginia City, mining town. Rough place for a lady alone." "Virginia City, then?" The agent shrugged and wrote out her ticket. Stage might be late, had reports of trouble on the mountain pass. Heavy rains washed out part of the road. Hope nodded absently, too tired to care about delays. Every mile between her and Willow Creek, between her and Preston, was a mile closer to safety. For all of them. As the morning wore on, the small station began to fill with other passengers, a salesman with a case of patent medicines, an elderly couple returning from visiting family, a young mother with 2 small children. Hope kept to herself, hat brim pulled low over her face. Noon came and went with no sign of the stage. The station agent posted a notice that the coach would be delayed until the following morning due to the road conditions. The other passengers grumbled, but began making arrangements for overnight accommodations. Hope's heart sank. She couldn't afford to stay in Cedar Springs where someone from Willow Creek might see her. But she had nowhere else to go. "Miss O'Malley?" Hope's head snapped up at the familiar voice. Preston stood in the doorway of the station, his expression a mixture of relief and determination. "How did you find me?" she asked, too shocked to deny her identity. "Process of elimination. Checked every town within walking distance." He approached slowly, as if afraid she might bolt. "May I sit?" Hope nodded mutely, and Preston settled beside her on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I saw the newspaper clipping in your room," he said without preamble. "Mrs. Wheeler was worried when you disappeared. We thought you might have been taken against your will." Hope stared at her hands. "You had no right to enter my room." "No, I didn't. But I'm glad I did." Preston leaned forward, trying to catch her eye. "Vincent Blackwood. That's who you're running from." It wasn't a question. Hope closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her carefully constructed life crumbling around her. "Tell me," Preston said gently. And somehow, in this dusty stagecoach station with strangers milling about, Hope found herself speaking words she'd never uttered aloud. "I worked as a companion to Eleanor Blackwood in Chicago. She was kind to me when no one else was. Her husband, Vincent, was a businessman with powerful connections, respected, admired." Hope's voice hardened, "and cruel beyond measure. The things he did to her." Preston's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "Eleanor wanted to leave him. She'd been secretly putting money aside, making plans. Vincent found out." Hope swallowed hard. "I came home early from an errand one day and found him standing over her with a fireplace poker in his hand. There was so much blood." "You witnessed him killing his wife," Preston stated quietly. Hope nodded. "I testified at his trial. He had powerful friends, lawyers who tried to discredit me, paint me as a jealous servant making up stories. But the evidence was too strong. He was sentenced to 10 years. A bitter laugh escaped her. "Only 10 years for taking her life, and now he's free after just 3. And hunting for you. He swore in the courtroom that he would find me, that I would pay for what I'd done." Hope looked at Preston directly. "I didn't kill Eleanor, but my testimony sent her husband to prison. Now he wants revenge." "So you've been running for 3 years, moving from town to town, never staying long enough to form connections. Until Willow Creek." Hope's voice softened. "Until you." Preston reached out slowly and took her hand. To her surprise, Hope didn't pull away. "Come back with me," he said. "I can't. Vincent will find me eventually. He has money, connections." "Let him come." The steel in Preston's voice made Hope look up sharply. "I'm a federal marshal, Hope. I have connections too. And unlike Blackwood, mine operate within the law." "You don't understand. He's dangerous. So am I when someone threatens those I care about." Preston's thumb brushed over her knuckles. "You've been alone with this burden for too long. Let me help you carry it." Hope's throat tightened. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." "I know enough." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I know you're brave and kind. I know you risked everything to seek justice for your friend. I know that despite everything you've been through, you still have the capacity to care for those children at the school, to bring joy to my sister's life, to make me feel more alive than I have in years." Tears welled in Hope's eyes. "Preston, you can keep running, Hope. I won't stop you, but if you do, Vincent Blackwood has already won. He's stolen 3 years of your life. Don't let him take your future, too." Hope looked around the station, at the ticket in her hand, at the road stretching west away from danger, but also away from everything that had begun to matter to her. "What would I do?" she whispered. "Live in fear, always looking over my shoulder? No. You'd live your life teaching, building friendships, discovering what makes you happy. And when Blackwood shows his face, we'll be ready for him. Together." Together. Such a simple word, yet it held a world of promise that Hope had denied herself for so long. "I'm scared," she admitted. Preston's hand tightened around hers. "I know. But I think you're tired of running too." He was right. The exhaustion Hope felt went beyond physical fatigue. It was bone-deep weariness from carrying her fear and guilt alone, from denying herself connection, from believing she didn't deserve happiness. "If I come back," Hope's voice wavered. "If I come back to Willow Creek, I can't promise you anything. My life is complicated." "I'm not asking for promises, just a chance." Preston stood and extended his hand. "My horse is outside. We can be home by nightfall." Home. When had Willow Creek become home? Hope looked down at her ticket to Virginia City, then back at Preston's outstretched hand. Slowly, deliberately, she tore the ticket in half and placed it on the bench. "Let's go home," she said, taking his hand. The ride back to Willow Creek was mostly silent, both of them processing the revelations of the day. Hope sat behind Preston this time, her arms tentatively wrapped around his waist. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid warmth of Preston's back gradually eased some of the tension from her body. As they crested the final hill overlooking Willow Creek, the setting sun bathed the small town in golden light. From this distance, it looked peaceful, ordinary, a place where people lived simple lives unmarked by the kind of violence and fear that had defined Hope's existence for so long. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Preston glanced over his shoulder. "It is. Not much compared to Chicago, I imagine." "Chicago was never home, just a place I lived." They rode down into town, drawing curious glances from the few people still out on the streets. Word of Hope's abrupt departure and Preston's pursuit had clearly spread. Mrs. Wheeler was waiting on the porch of the boarding house, arms crossed but relief evident on her face. "You found her then?" she called as they approached. Preston dismounted and helped Hope down. "She decided to come back on her own, Mrs. Wheeler." The older woman harumphed but opened the door wider. "Your room's as you left it, Miss O'Malley, though I expect some explanation for all this drama." Hope exchanged a look with Preston. "It's a long story, Mrs. Wheeler. Perhaps tomorrow." "Tomorrow, then." "But I expect the full account, mind you." She retreated inside, leaving them alone on the porch. "She means well," Preston said with a small smile. "I know." Hope hesitated. "Thank you for coming after me." "Always." The word was simple, but the promise behind it was not. Hope looked away, overwhelmed by the emotion in his eyes. "What happens now?" "Now, you rest. Tomorrow, we make a plan." Preston took a step back, respecting her need for space. "I'll call on you in the morning, if that's acceptable." Hope nodded. "Good night, Preston." "Good night, Hope." She watched him mount his horse and ride toward his own home, wondering at the strange mixture of fear and hope that filled her chest. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't facing her demons alone. It was terrifying and comforting in equal measure. That night, Hope slept deeply, without nightmares. Morning brought a knock at her door, not Preston, as she had expected, but Penny, bearing fresh bread and a determined expression. "My brother told me everything," she announced without preamble, or at least the parts he thought I should know. Hope stepped back, allowing Penny to enter the small room. "I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye." "You should be." Penny set the bread on the table and turned to face Hope. "We're friends, aren't we? Friends don't disappear without a word." The simple declaration of friendship brought tears to Hope's eyes. "I was trying to protect you, all of you. By leaving us worried sick, Preston nearly wore a hole in my floor pacing before he went after you." Penny's expression softened. "He cares for you, you know. More than I've seen him care for anyone in a long time." Hope sat on the edge of her bed. "I can't offer him anything, Penny. My life is complicated." "Life is always complicated. That's what makes it worth living." Penny sat beside her. "Preston told me about the man who's looking for you. This Blackwood character." Hope tensed. "Then you understand why I should leave." "I understand why you're scared, but running isn't the answer." Penny took Hope's hand. "My brother is the most capable man I know. If he says he can protect you, he can." It's not just about protection. It's about putting all of you in danger. Vincent is vindictive. He won't stop at hurting just me." Penny squared her shoulders. "Let him try. Willow Creek takes care of its own." "I'm not." "You are," Penny interrupted firmly. "You're one of us now, whether you like it or not." The certainty in her voice left no room for argument. Hope felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen a knot of loneliness she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "Now," Penny continued, practical as ever, "eat your breakfast. Preston will be here soon to escort you to the sheriff's office. They're working on some sort of plan." True to Penny's word, Preston arrived an hour later. The walk to the sheriff's office was both public and deliberate a statement to the town that Hope was back and under the marshal's protection. Sheriff Hadley, a gruff man with surprisingly kind eyes, listened without interruption as Hope recounted her history with Vincent Blackwood. When she finished, he exchanged a look with Preston. "Sounds like this Blackwood fella has money and grudges to spare," the sheriff observed, "but he'd be a fool to come after you here." "With respect, Sheriff, you don't know Vincent," Hope said. "He's not easily deterred." "Neither are we, Miss O'Malley." Hadley leaned forward. "Deputy Marshal Winters here has already telegraphed his superiors in Helena. They're aware of the situation and have alerted authorities in Chicago to Blackwood's threats." Preston nodded. "We've also contacted the U.S. Marshal's office in Chicago. They'll be keeping an eye on Blackwood's movements." Hope looked between the two men, a flicker of hope kindling in her chest. "You've done all this already?" "It's just the beginning," Preston assured her. "We're also going to establish some precautions here in town." The sheriff pulled out a map of Willow Creek. "You'll continue your normal routines, teaching at the school, living at the boarding house, but with some adjustments. We'll have someone watching the school during the day. Mrs. Wheeler has agreed to alert us to any strangers asking about you. And I'll be escorting you to and from the school," Preston added. Hope shook her head. "You can't rearrange your entire life around protecting me." "It's not just for you," the sheriff interjected. "Blackwood sounds like the type who wouldn't hesitate to harm others to get to you. That makes him a threat to my town." "Exactly," Preston agreed. "This isn't charity, Hope. It's law enforcement doing its job." Hope wasn't entirely convinced, but the determined expressions on both men's faces suggested further argument would be futile. "What about the children?" she asked instead. "I don't want them in danger." "Penny already has a plan for that," Preston assured her. "She's going to tell them there's been word of a bear in the area, so they need to stay together and be extra vigilant. No wandering off alone." The thoroughness of their planning was both reassuring and overwhelming. For 3 years, Hope had shouldered the burden of her fear alone, making all decisions, constantly looking over her shoulder. Having others share that responsibility was a foreign sensation. "I don't know how to thank you," she said finally. Sheriff Hadley waved away her gratitude. "Thank us by living your life, Miss O'Malley. Don't let this Blackwood fella steal any more of your time." It was easier said than done, but over the next few weeks, Hope gradually settled back into her routine in Willow Creek. Preston walked her to school each morning and collected her each afternoon. Sometimes they would take the long way home, strolling along the creek that gave the town its name, talking about everything and nothing. Hope learned that Preston had grown up in Montana territory, the son of a rancher. He'd become a marshal after his father was killed by cattle rustlers who were never brought to justice. Penny had inherited their mother's love of education and had started the school 3 years earlier. In turn, Hope shared pieces of her own past, her childhood in Ohio, the loss of her parents to influenza when she was 17, her journey to Chicago in search of work. She spoke of Eleanor more freely now, remembering the good times rather than just the tragic end. With each conversation, the connection between Hope and Preston deepened. She found herself looking forward to their walks, to the sound of his voice, to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. But she was careful to maintain boundaries, unwilling to pull him further into her complicated life than he already was. June brought warmer weather and the end of the school term. The children presented Hope with handmade gifts on the last day drawings, a clumsily woven bracelet, a polished stone. Their unguarded affection brought tears to her eyes. "Will you be our teacher again next term, Miss O'Malley?" little Sarah Stevens asked, her front tooth missing and her braids askew. Hope glanced at Penny, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like that very much," Hope replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. That evening, Preston invited Hope to supper at his home, the first time they would be alone together outside of their daily walks. Hope accepted with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Preston's house was small but well built, situated on the edge of town with a view of the mountains. Inside was simply furnished but comfortable, with bookshelves lining one wall. "You read," Hope observed, running her fingers along the spines of volumes ranging from law books to poetry. "When I can. Occupational hazard of growing up with a schoolteacher for a sister." Preston busied himself at the stove. "Nothing fancy for supper, I'm afraid. Just beef stew." "It smells wonderful." Hope moved to the window, looking out at the lengthening shadows. "Your home is lovely." "Thank you. It's the first place that's felt like mine." Preston brought 2 bowls to the table. "My father's ranch was sold after his death to pay debts. Penny and I had to start over." "I'm sorry." Hope took a seat across from him. "That must have been difficult." "It was, but it taught us both what matters." Preston's eyes met hers. "Not things or places, but people. Connections." Hope looked down at her bowl, suddenly uncertain. "Preston, You don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know you're still cautious. I'm not asking for promises, remember?" The reminder of his words at the stagecoach station eased some of the tension in Hope's shoulders. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Preston spoke again. "I received a telegram from Chicago today." Hope's spoon clattered against her bowl. "About Vincent?" Preston nodded. "He left the city 2 weeks ago, told an associate he was heading west on personal business." Cold fear washed over Hope. "He's coming for me." "We don't know that for certain." "I do." Hope pushed her bowl away, appetite gone. "He won't stop until he finds me." Preston reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Then let him come. We're ready for him." Hope wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the protection of this man and this town that had somehow become hers. But the fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years was not easily banished. "I should go," she said, rising from the table. Preston stood as well. "I'll walk you back to the boarding house." Outside, the summer twilight painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold. They walked in silence, Preston respecting Hope's need to process the news about Vincent. At the boarding house steps, Hope paused. "Thank you for supper, and for telling me about Vincent. I won't keep things from you, Hope. You deserve to know what we're facing." The word "we" didn't escape her notice. Despite her best efforts to maintain distance, Preston had firmly aligned himself with her cause. The realization was both frightening and deeply moving. "Good night, Preston." He caught her hand as she turned to go. "Hope." His voice was low, urgent. "I need you to know something." She met his gaze questioningly. "Whatever happens, whatever Blackwood tries, I won't let him hurt you. I promise you that." The intensity in his blue eyes made Hope's breath catch. "Don't make promises you might not be able to keep." "I don't," he said simply. Before she could respond, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture, so unexpectedly tender, sent warmth cascading through her body. "Good night, Hope." She watched him walk away, her hand tingling where his lips had touched it. For the first time in years, Hope allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival, a future that included Preston Winters. The 4th of July brought Willow Creek's biggest celebration of the year. Flags decorated the main street, and preparations were underway for a picnic in the town square, followed by fireworks after dark. Despite the continued threat of Vincent Blackwood, Sheriff Hadley insisted the festivities proceed as planned. "We'll have extra men on duty," he assured Hope when she expressed concern. "And hiding away won't do anyone any good." Penny had convinced Hope to help with the children's games, setting up sack races and apple bobbing in one corner of the square. Preston was busy with his marshal duties but managed to stop by several times throughout the day, his eyes finding Hope's across the crowded square. As twilight approached, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a warm glow over the gathering. A makeshift dance floor had been created in the center, and several couples were already twirling to the music of a small band. Hope was helping to serve lemonade when Preston appeared at her elbow, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. "May I have this dance, Miss O'Malley?" he asked, extending his hand. Hope hesitated, glancing around at the crowded square. "Are you sure that's wise? You're supposed to be watching for trouble? I have deputies positioned all around the square, and I can watch just as well from the dance floor." His smile was warm. "Besides, it's Independence Day. Seems fitting to celebrate a little freedom." The double meaning wasn't lost on Hope. She placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. As before, Preston's touch was respectful but confident as he guided her through a lively reel. "You're getting better at this," he observed as they circled each other. Hope laughed, the sound surprising her with its ease. A good teacher makes all the difference. They danced through 2 more songs before Hope needed a rest. Preston led her to a quiet corner of the square, away from the main crush of people. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked. "More than I expected to," Hope admitted. "It's been a long time since I attended a celebration like this." "Too long," Preston agreed. His hand still held hers, a thumb tracing small circles on her palm. "Hope, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." The serious note in his voice made her look up sharply. "What is it? Has there been news of Vincent?" "No, nothing like that." Preston took a deep breath. "It's about us." Hope's heart quickened. "Preston, please let me finish." He moved closer, his eyes intent on hers. "These past months, getting to know you, being with you, they've been the best of my life. I know your situation is complicated. I know you're scared, but I need you to know that Preston Winters." The sharp voice cut through the evening air like a knife. Both Hope and Preston turned toward the sound. A man stood at the edge of the square, silhouetted against the fading light. Even in the growing darkness, Hope would have recognized that tall, imposing figure anywhere. Vincent Blackwood had found her. "Get behind me," Preston ordered quietly, positioning himself between Hope and the newcomer. Vincent stepped forward into the pool of lantern light. He was as handsome as Hope remembered, distinguished even, with silver at his temples and expensive clothes that set him apart from the townspeople of Willow Creek. Only his eyes betrayed him, cold and filled with a malice that made Hope shiver. "I've been looking for you, Miss O'Malley," Vincent called, his cultured voice carrying across the suddenly quiet square. "You're a difficult woman to find." Preston's hand moved to the pistol at his hip. "That's far enough, Blackwood." Vincent's gaze shifted to Preston, assessing. "And you are?" "Deputy U.S. Marshal Preston Winters. Miss O'Malley is under my protection." A thin smile curved Vincent's lips. "How gallant. Did she tell you why I've been looking for her, Marshal? Did she tell you what she did?" "She told me everything," Preston replied evenly, "including how you murdered your wife and tried to blame her for it." Vincent's smile vanished. "The courts may have believed her lies, but I know the truth, and I've come to make sure justice is served." Hope stepped out from behind Preston, ignoring his attempt to keep her back. "You killed Eleanor," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I saw you do it. The jury saw the evidence. You're the only liar here, Vincent." The gathered townspeople had formed a loose circle around them, watching the confrontation with confusion and concern. Sheriff Hadley had appeared at the edge of the crowd, hand on his own weapon. "She was leaving you," Hope continued, the words pouring out after years of silence. "She was finally going to be free of your cruelty. That's why you killed her." Vincent's face darkened with rage. "You poisoned her mind against me. You turned my wife against me, and then you lied to send me to prison." "The evidence sent you to prison," Preston interjected, "and threatening a witness is another crime. I suggest you leave Willow Creek now, while you still can." Vincent's hand moved to his coat, and several people gasped. But instead of a weapon, he withdrew a folded document. "I have a warrant for Miss O'Malley's arrest," he announced, "signed by Judge Sullivan of Chicago. Perjury and obstruction of justice." Preston stepped forward and took the document, examining it carefully. Hope's blood ran cold. Judge Sullivan had been one of Vincent's closest friends, one of the powerful connections that had nearly saved him from conviction. "This warrant is worthless here," Preston said finally, handing it back. "It has no jurisdiction in Montana territory, and even if it did, the charges are clearly fabricated." Vincent's smile returned, colder than before. "Perhaps, but I have other means of ensuring justice." His hand moved again, this time emerging with a small derringer. Before anyone could react, he had it pointed at Hope. "An eye for an eye, Miss O'Malley. You took my life from me. Now I'll take yours." Several things happened at once. Preston lunged forward, reaching for his own weapon. Sheriff Hadley shouted a warning, and Hope, who had spent 3 years running from this moment, found herself rooted to the spot, unable to move as death stared her in the face. A shot rang out, echoing across the square. Hope flinched, waiting for the impact, the pain. Instead, she heard a grunt and opened her eyes to see Vincent staggering backward, clutching his shoulder. His derringer clattered to the ground. Preston stood with his pistol still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. "Next one won't be in the shoulder," he warned. Sheriff Hadley and 2 deputies rushed forward, disarming Vincent and restraining him despite his protests and threats. "Get him to the doctor, then lock him up," Hadley ordered, "and send a telegram to the federal marshal's office in Helena. Attempted murder of a federal witness is their jurisdiction." As Vincent was led away, still shouting threats, Hope felt her knees give way. Preston caught her before she could fall, his arms steady around her waist. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair. "He can't hurt you anymore." The tension that had held Hope rigid for 3 years suddenly broke. She sagged against Preston's chest, tears streaming down her face. He held her close, shielding her from the curious eyes of the townspeople, murmuring reassurances that she barely heard through her sobs. Eventually, the storm of emotion subsided enough for Hope to become aware of their surroundings. The celebration had resumed at the other end of the square, giving them a measure of privacy. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling back slightly to look at Preston's face. "I didn't mean to. Don't apologize." Preston brushed a tear from her cheek. "You've been carrying this fear for so long. It's over now." "Is it? Really over?" "Vincent Blackwood will face federal charges for attempting to murder a protected witness. He won't threaten you again." Preston's eyes were fierce with determination. "I promise you that." Hope wanted to believe him. After years of looking over her shoulder, the idea that she could truly be free of Vincent's shadow seemed almost impossible to grasp. "Come on," Preston said gently. "Let me take you home." He led her away from the square, his arm around her waist. The sounds of music and laughter faded behind them as they walked toward the boarding house. Neither spoke, both processing the events of the evening in their own way. At the boarding house steps, Hope turned to face Preston. "You could have been killed." "So could you." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "I told you I wouldn't let him hurt you." Why? The question that had been in her heart for months finally found voice. "Why risk yourself for me?" Preston's expression softened. "You know why, Hope." "I need to hear you say it." He stepped closer, both hands now framing her face. "Because I love you. Because from the moment you arrived in Willow Creek, something in me recognized something in you. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I've found a piece of myself I didn't know was missing." Hope closed her eyes, overwhelmed by his words, by the depth of feeling behind them. "Preston, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know it's too soon. After everything that's happened tonight, you need time." Hope opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. "No, I don't. I've wasted enough time running from the past. I don't want to waste another moment running from the future. From us. Hope rose on her tiptoes, her hands coming to rest on Preston's chest. Slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wished, she pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened as Preston's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. Hope melted against him, 3 years of loneliness and fear dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "Does this mean you're staying in Willow Creek?" Hope smiled, a genuine smile untainted by shadows for the first time in years. "Yes, this is where I belong. With you." Over the next few days, the town of Willow Creek buzzed with the drama of Vincent Blackwood's arrival and arrest. Hope found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered conversations, but to her surprise, the predominant sentiment was concern for her welfare rather than suspicion. Penny had been particularly fierce in her defense, publicly declaring at the general store that anyone who thinks ill of Miss O'Malley can answer to me. Coming from the normally gentle schoolteacher, the statement had a significant impact on public opinion. Vincent remained under guard at the jail, his gunshot wound treated by the town doctor. Federal marshals were due to arrive within the week to transfer him to Helena for trial. Hope had given her statement to Sheriff Hadley, recounting the events in Chicago and Vincent's threats. The process had been draining but cathartic. Preston had been by her side throughout, steady and supportive without being overbearing. Their relationship had shifted since the night of the 4th of July celebration, the unspoken feelings between them now acknowledged and embraced. They still moved carefully, both aware of the recent trauma and the watchful eyes of the small town, but there was a new openness between them that Hope treasured. 1 week after Vincent's arrest, Hope sat on the porch of the boarding house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and pink. The letter from Eleanor, her last letter, lay open in her lap. For years, Hope had carried it as a reminder of her failure to protect her friend. Now, for the first time, she read it as Eleanor had intended, as an expression of hope for the future. "My dearest Hope," the letter read, "by the time you receive this, I will have left Vincent. I cannot express how your friendship has given me the courage to finally break free. You showed me that a different life is possible, that I deserve more than fear and pain. Wherever the future takes us, know that you have been the truest friend, and that because of you, I am finally claiming the happiness that should be every woman's right." Eleanor had never had the chance to claim that happiness. Vincent had found her plans and killed her before she could escape. But her words now struck Hope in a new way, not as an accusation, but as a legacy. By testifying against Vincent, by surviving, by finally finding her own courage to stop running, Hope had honored Eleanor's memory more truly than she had realized. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled Hope from her thoughts. Preston climbed the steps to the porch, hat in hand, his expression grave. "The federal marshals arrived," he said without preamble. "They're transferring Blackwood to Helena tomorrow morning." Hope nodded, folding Eleanor's letter carefully. "Will I need to testify at his new trial?" "Eventually, yes, but not for some time." Preston settled into the chair beside her. "They have enough evidence for the attempted murder charge without your immediate testimony." Relief washed over Hope. The thought of facing Vincent in another courtroom was daunting, but knowing she had time to prepare made it more manageable. "What will happen to him?" she asked. "Attempted murder of a federal witness carries a long sentence. Combined with his prior conviction and escape from justice," Preston's expression hardened. "He won't threaten you again, Hope. I promise you that." Hope reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. "I believe you." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the last rays of sunlight faded from the mountains. Finally, Preston turned to her, his expression now uncertain. "There's something I need to ask you." Hope looked at him questioningly. "The federal marshals offered me a position in Helena." Hope's heart sank. Helena was the territorial capital, a larger post with more responsibility and natural advancement for an ambitious lawman. It was also nearly 100 miles away. That's wonderful, she managed, forcing a smile. When would you leave? I haven't accepted yet. Preston squeezed her hand. I wanted to talk to you first. It's a great opportunity, Preston. You shouldn't pass it up because of the woman I love, he interrupted gently. The woman who's become the center of my world. Hope's breath caught at the open declaration. Preston, I don't want to hold you back. You misunderstand me. Preston shifted in his chair to face her directly. I'm not asking your permission to leave. I'm asking if you'd consider coming with me. Hope stared at him, trying to process his words. To Helena. To Helena as my wife. The world seemed to still around them. Hope looked into Preston's blue eyes, so earnest and full of love, and felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Preston, are you proposing? He smiled, a touch of nervousness in his expression. Not very well, apparently. He slid from the chair to one knee before her, still holding her hand. Hope O'Malley, I love you. I want to build a life with you in Helena, in Willow Creek, wherever our paths may lead. Will you marry me? Hope's free hand went to her mouth, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. For so long, she had denied herself the possibility of such happiness, convinced that her past had cursed her to a life of solitude and fear. But Preston had seen through her defenses, had pursued her not as prey, but as someone precious, had shown her that her past wasn't a curse, but a map that had led her exactly where she needed to be. Yes, she whispered through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Preston's face lit with joy. He rose just enough to capture her lips in a kiss that spoke of promises and futures and love without conditions. When they parted, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a simple band with a modest diamond that caught the last light of day. It was my mother's, he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. Penny insisted I should have it for this moment. Hope stared at the ring, a tangible symbol of belonging, of family, of roots she had thought forever denied to her. It's beautiful. Penny will be ecstatic, Preston said with a smile. She's been dropping hints about wanting a sister for months now. Hope laughed through her tears. And the children? What will they think of their teacher becoming Mrs. Winters? They'll be delighted. Especially when they learn that the marshal's wife will still be teaching them their letters. Preston's expression grew more serious. You can still teach, Hope. In Helena, there will be schools that would be fortunate to have you. The thoughtfulness of his consideration that he had already thought about how she might continue the work she had come to love touched Hope deeply. When would we leave? After the wedding. If you're willing, I thought perhaps next month. Nothing elaborate, just family and friends. Preston's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Unless you'd prefer to wait? Hope shook her head. I've waited long enough for happiness. A month sounds perfect. As darkness settled over Willow Creek, Hope and Preston remained on the porch, planning their future. Sharing hopes and dreams that had been too fragile to voice before. The fear that had been Hope's constant companion for 3 years gradually receded, replaced by a quiet certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would no longer face them alone. The following morning, Hope stood with Preston on the edge of town, watching as the federal marshals departed with Vincent Blackwood in custody. The man who had haunted her nightmares looked smaller somehow, diminished by his bandaged shoulder and shackled hands. As the dust from the departing horses settled, Hope felt a profound sense of closure, not just for Eleanor's death, but for the years of running, of looking over her shoulder, of denying herself connection out of fear. Are you all right? Preston asked, his arm supportive around her waist. Hope looked up at him, at the man who had become her future. Yes, she said with quiet certainty. For the first time in a very long time, I truly am. 4 weeks later, Hope stood in Penny's bedroom, a vision in ivory silk. The wedding dress was simple but elegant, borrowed from a friend of Penny's who had married the previous year. Hope's auburn hair was arranged in soft curls, with sprigs of wildflowers woven through the tresses. "You look beautiful," Penny declared, adjusting the lace at Hope's neckline. "My brother won't know what hit him." Hope smiled, nervous excitement fluttering in her stomach. "I can hardly believe this is happening." "Believe it." Penny squeezed her hands. "You deserve this happiness, Hope. Both of you do." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Sheriff Hadley, who had agreed to walk Hope down the aisle in the absence of any family. "Ready, Miss O'Malley?" the sheriff asked, his gruff voice softened with emotion. "Everyone's waiting." Hope took a deep breath. "Ready?" The small church was filled with the people of Willow Creek, the children from the school and their parents, Mrs. Wheeler from the boarding house, the mercantile owners, and dozens of others who had become friends over the past months. At the altar stood Preston, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his eyes finding Hope's the moment she appeared in the doorway. The look of pure adoration on his face as she walked toward him was something Hope knew she would remember for the rest of her life. This man had seen her at her most vulnerable, had known her darkest secrets, and still looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in the bonds of holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Preston spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure, his eyes never leaving Hope's face. When it was her turn, Hope's voice trembled slightly with emotion, but her commitment was unwavering. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Preston's hands cradled Hope's face with infinite tenderness as he sealed their union with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and protection. The church erupted in cheers as they turned to face their friends as Mr. and Mrs. Winters. The celebration that followed at the town square was joyous and lively. Children danced around the newlyweds, pressing flowers into Hope's hands. The women of the town had prepared a feast that stretched across 3 tables. As the sun began to set, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. "Happy, Mrs. Winters?" Preston asked, pulling Hope close as they shared a quiet moment away from the festivities. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "And you?" "I have everything I could ever want right here." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Our train leaves for Helena tomorrow. Are you ready for our new adventure?" Hope looked around at the town that had become her sanctuary, at the people who had accepted her despite her secrets, at the man who had shown her that the past could be a beginning rather than an ending. "As long as we're together," she said, "I'm ready for anything." The journey to Helena marked the beginning of a new chapter for Hope and Preston. The territorial capital was larger and busier than Willow Creek, but they quickly established themselves in their new community. Preston's position as a federal marshal brought him respect and responsibility, while Hope found a position teaching at a growing school on the east side of the city. Their home, a small but charming house near the edge of town, became a place of warmth and laughter. Penny visited often, eventually accepting a position at a larger school in Helena herself. The siblings remained close, and Hope treasured the sense of family she had found with them. In the spring of 1878, almost 2 years after arriving in Willow Creek, Hope received news that Vincent Blackwood had been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for his crimes. The letter from the prosecutor's office marked the final closure of that chapter of her life. That same week, Hope and Preston welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor, in honor of the friend whose tragedy had ultimately led Hope to the happiness she had found. As Hope cradled her newborn daughter, Preston sitting beside them on the bed with pride and wonder in his eyes, she reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought her here. "What are you thinking?" Preston asked, gently touching their daughter's tiny hand. Hope smiled, looking from her husband to their child. I was thinking about maps, she said, about how sometimes the most difficult journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Preston's eyes, still as blue and steadfast as the day they'd met, filled with understanding. I told you your past wasn't a curse, he reminded her softly. It was the map that brought you to me. Hope leaned into his embrace, their daughter nestled between them. And to think I almost tore up that map and kept running. But you didn't, Preston pressed a kiss to her temple. You were brave enough to stop running and start living. As twilight settled over Helena, painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold much like those in Willow Creek, Hope O'Malley Winters looked at the family she had created from the ashes of her past and felt a profound sense of peace. The blood she had once seen on her hands had been washed away by love, by justice, by the passage of time, and by her own courage to believe in second chances. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but the destination, this moment, this life, this love, had been worth every step.